Our story begins with our protagonist catching his breath, exhausted and in pain, thinking that he doesn't want to die. He tried his best to quickly escape, but his body was in so much pain, making him furiously wonder why it was only him going through this. He then tripped on his own feet and slammed onto the floor, which made him let go of his sword. He shakily tried to stand up while coughing and calling for someone to help him, but his body fell, and Takamichi Yoshito, a low-tier challenger, lay on the floor, hopelessly crying and begging for someone to help him. Suddenly, someone huge stepped onto the ground, making the whole place shake. It then walked closer to him, and it was the elite demon. He shakily stood up to face the elite demon, wondering how miserable he was to be tormented and looked down upon. He then furiously asked if it was fun and if they were satisfied now. He then raised his sword and shouted that he would never give up, even if everyone laughed at him or that damned world abandoned him. He then dashes toward the elite demon while shouting that he had no choice but to move forward. But the elite demon just scratched him with its sharp claws even before he could attack it. He was in tears and felt hurt. He was on the ground while the elite demon gathered its power in its palm. He tried to crawl away from the elite demon aiming at him. The elite demon stared at him and attacked him with its power, but the elite demon missed by an inch. When he noticed that the impact affected the floor, he knew that it was bad. Suddenly, the ground shattered, and he raised his hand to the elite demon, swearing that he would definitely become a strong challenger. He then falls crying, screaming on top of his lungs, then the system informs him that he died. Magic Tower, an enigmatic structure beyond human understanding, was the commonly known term for tower-like dungeons that suddenly appeared all over the world. The interior is like a world straight out of a game, with swords, magic skills, and monsters. The magic stones and treasures sleeping in the magic tower are traded at high prices, and those who sought treasures are called challengers. However, challenging the magic tower came with a risk to life. Even though it was like a game, death in the magic tower means death in reality. Yoshito, who had died, slowly opened his eyes and realized that he had died again. He slapped his face, knowing that this wasn't how things should go, while the system showed him that his death had been confirmed and his infinite revival skill had been activated. But the remaining time was 10 seconds. Infinite revival means that no matter how many times they die in the magic tower, it was a skill that could bring them back to life. But he was pissed, realizing that he had been fooled. After he graduated from high school, he lived a life filled with part-time jobs. However, when the magic tower appeared, he believed his life could change if he became a challenger. Every day became a struggle to seize magic stones and treasures. In order to win the competition, he tried to acquire a rare skill that no one else had. The one selling infinite revival was the merchant at the entrance of the magic tower. He withdrew all of his savings and even went into debt to purchase it, obtaining a body that doesn't die. However, as a death penalty, it applies a permanent debuff of 500 DEF. With infinite revival, each time he comes back to life, his abilities are reduced, and he has died 4 times so far. The first time he died, his DEF was reduced by 50. Even though his original stat value was only 53, which brought him to the brink of death with a single blow earlier. The second time, it was a reduction of 70 attack, and the third time, it was a reduction of 250 HP. The negative effect received is random each time, and this time around, his agility was reduced by 60. He laughed, knowing that if it kept getting rebuffed, only 1 point would be left to him. In the magic tower, the body structure changes based on their stats. If agility decreases, the body becomes heavier and eventually they'll become unable to move. Once it happens, they won't be able to continue as a challenger. He ended up burdened with debt and stuck with a completely worthless skill. The system showed him that he would be revived, so he should get ready, but he was getting frustrated. He then woke up and saw himself on the destroyed ground, wondering if he had come back to life. He sits up and notices that his body feels heavy, thinking it is probably because his agility has become 1. He knows that with it, even moving around is going to be tough for him. He then looks around, wondering where that place is and if he was right that he has fallen to a lower floor. He felt something around him, making him wonder what that atmosphere was, because he had never heard of such a place in the lower levels. He then noticed something shining in front of him and was shocked to see that it was a skill stone, and it was golden, which means it was ultra rare. He knows that it can be sold for a high price and it might be possible to repay the debt he took on. He tried to stand up, knowing that it was the only thing he was determined to bring back with him no matter what, and walked slowly to it, noticing that there were no monsters there, making him think that it was easy to win. But then, he stepped on tiles and the wall released a lot of holes. Suddenly, it threw knives that hit him in every part of his body, including his eye, making him shout in pain and die for the 5th time. His infinite revival has been activated, and as his death penalty, a permanent debuff of 65 strength has been applied. He revived again and noticed that the place was a trap. Clenching his teeth, he declared that such a level shouldn't even think it could stop him. However, he noticed that he couldn't move his limbs and his muscle strength was reduced. Leaning on the wall in weakness, he pushed against it, only to realize that it was another trap. Suddenly, a statue dragon emerged from underground, glared at him with its red eyes, and burned him alive. He died for the 6th time, revived once more, and as his death penalty, a permanent debuff of 250 HP was applied. He jumped to the side to avoid the continuous fire coming out of the dragon statue, and rolled to get closer to the rare skill. He was glad to see that he was closer and realized that the reason for the narrow passage's existence was to lure challengers enticed by rare skills and to effectively kill them with traps. He knew that under normal circumstances, no matter how many lives they have, they wouldn't be able to pass through. But he remarked that, unfortunately and surely, he was currently the weakest challenger in that magic tower, but he already had plenty of alternative lives. He then ran toward the rare skill, but then a huge blade fell above him, killing him for the 7th time. His infinite revival activated, and as his death penalty, his magic power was debuffed to 80 and his technical capabilities to 55. A moment later, he wondered how many times he had died because he had no sensation in his entire body, and his vision was also blurry while getting debuffed by 90 vitality and 40 magic resistance as a penalty. Once more, he got pierced by a swarm of spears coming from underground and got debuffed by 60 intelligence, making him feel like his consciousness was about to fade away. However, he managed to grab the rare skill, thinking it was his victory, but he slowly collapsed and the status asking him if he wanted to use the skill stone. A moment later, the system showed him that since there was no response, its automatic usage would be initiated, and he had acquired the skill Inversion. After that, he woke up confused because he felt stronger and his consciousness was clear. He wondered what was going on because he didn't feel the effects of the death penalties that were so harsh before. He then told the system to check his status, and he was shocked to see that the powerful negative effects he had been receiving until now had all turned into positives. The system then showed him that the skill Inversion effect is to reverse all effects, including buffs, debuffs, and status abnormalities. He understood that thanks to that skill, all the debuffs he had received so far had been reversed into positive effects. However, he wondered when he had acquired such a skill. Then he saw the rare skill stone box and realized it was empty, making him wonder if it had been automatically used. He realized that his money was gone. However, he thought it might be a good thing because all the penalties of infinite revival are reversed by Inversion. He'll get stronger every time he dies. With that power, as a challenger, he can now rise to the top and once more swears that no matter what, he will become the strongest challenger, earn a fortune, and acquire fame. He then looked behind him and saw the path with his blood spread everywhere, wondering if, in order to return home, he'd have to go that way. He knows that the instant death trap has returned to its pre-activated state, making him wonder if it will be activated again once he gets close and if it means he'll be killed again by all those instant death traps. He panics and shouts that there is no way he can do it because even if he was revived, it is still insanely painful, and if he died too many times in a row, then definitely, he'd go insane. He shivers upon remembering the pain he went through, but he knows that his current stats are now double the original, thanks to his Inversion skill, making him guess that he might be able to break through the traps head-on. He gulped in fear and faced the traps, knowing that there was no other way and he had no choice but to give it a try. When he had finished convincing himself, he dashed forward at speed, and suddenly, a wall came out from underground. Then arrows were thrown at him, the arrows coming closer to him, and he sweats when one of the arrows is close to his eye. But he manages to dodge them using his agility and successfully lands on the floor unharmed. He couldn't believe that he could see the traps in front of him, but he managed to avoid them at speed and run past them. Suddenly, the huge blade appeared above him to kill him instantly, but it was too slow for him now and he ran past it easily. He then bent down to get ready for the next trap and dashed toward the dragon statue that came out from underground. The statue opened its mouth to release fire, and he quickly opened his inventory and clicked his weapon out. He grabbed his sword and shattered the statue before it could burn him alive. But when he got down, he accidentally stepped on the trap tile, and a swarm of knives was thrown in his direction. Calmly waiting for them to come near, he swung his sword around, blocking every one of the knives heading toward him. Finally, he sighed in relief when he passed all the traps. He was convinced that the combination of infinite revival, which gave him a death penalty each time it was activated, and Inversion could indeed make him the strongest challenger. Looking up, he realized the sheer height of the hole he had fallen through before. He knew that if he were still his former self, climbing back up from there would have been impossible. Then, he positioned himself and jumped, rushingly moving to the side of the hole to ascend and finally managed to reach the floor where the elite demon resided. He saw the elite demon standing on the floor and apologized for making it wait. He then got down on the floor and the elite demon walked closer to him. He attempted to slash the demon with his sword, but the demon simply blocked it with its bare hand and threw him away. The elite demon positioned itself, and he pointed his half-sword at it while asking if it wanted to try killing him again. The demon screamed in anger, but he calmly told it that he would play along. He then leaped towards the elite demon and challenged it, asking how long it thought it could fight against his infinite lives with just one life of its own. He leaped towards the demon, and the demon met him with its claw, but he dodged it and remarked on the amazement of how his stats could increase similarly. Then, he slashed the demon's hand, making it shout in pain. It tried to grab him, but he taunted it, saying its attacks no longer scared him. He then kicked the demon's neck to propel himself higher and struck it with all his might, sending it crashing into the wall hard. He landed on the floor, believing in his victory. But then the demon unleashed a strong power, stunning him. Realizing the danger, he jumped aside to avoid it. The power surged directly towards him, and he saw the demon standing in anger afterward. However, the elite demon was shocked to find that its attack had missed. He mocked the demon, saying it was close, and then mused aloud that it didn't seem like any third-floor monster at all. He knew that the higher they went in the tower, the stronger the monsters became. But he was currently on the 3rd floor, where only weaker monsters should appear. He then dashed towards the elite demon to slash at its head with his sword. But he jumped backward when the demon unfurled its wings and attempted to crush him. Fortunately, he dodged in time and leaped higher. His stats significantly increased thanks to the death penalties. The elite demon soared up to meet him, launching attacks which he continuously blocked. Commenting on its unusual strength for this floor and its unfamiliarity, he parried the demon's attacks with his sword, but the demon managed to slam him down to the floor. Still, he stood up and demanded to know what the demon was, receiving only a growl in response. He declared that he didn't expect an answer and taunted the demon, asserting that it was up against an exponentially stronger enemy, so they should settle the conflict once and for all. The elite demon then amassed power in both hands, and he noticed that this time it was using both of its hands. While looking at the demon, he was confused when the demon began to create a sword from its power, and he told the demon it's preparing something more formidable by shaping the power into a weapon, signaling its readiness to go all out. It screamed at him and launched a continuous assault with its newly formed weapon, which he tried desperately to dodge. He fled, cursing, but then the elite demon appeared behind him and struck, forcing him to slam onto the floor to block the attack with his sword, shattering the ground beneath them. He shouted to the elite demon with a grin that it was almost there, but then he noticed something shining beside him and saw the demon channeling power in its other hand. He cursed in despair and was hit in the head with the attack, causing his head to explode. Consequently, he died, and as a death penalty, his strength was debuffed by 40, but the inversion skill reversed it to a plus 40. As the elite demon walked away, thinking he had died, he moved and was ready to attack it from behind. But the demon blocked his attack in time. Furious, he demanded to know how it dared to kill him. Then, leveraging his sword upward to gain force, he launched a series of continuous attacks on the confused demon, shouting that even though he could revive, it still hurt like hell. He noticed that, thanks to his strength buff, he could now push it back, yet it still wasn't enough. He then swung his sword into its body, eliciting a shout of pain from the demon. It retaliated by releasing a powerful energy and gathering it, shocking him. The demon then created a massive explosion, causing him to die and debuffing his agility by 60, which was, fortunately, reversed by his inversion skill. Relieved that his agility had been buffed this time, he thought that with it, he could defeat the elite demon. He looked at the elite demon, who stared back at him and told it that it had fought well, but it was not enough. He then dashed toward it at incredible speed, meeting it in the center. He managed to dodge its attack and, with all his might, slashed it in half. The demon stood still behind him, and its body began to shatter, then exploded, leading him to believe it was the end. He declared that ultimately its life was limited and it had no chance of winning from the start. However, he was stunned to see it remained intact. Approaching it, he stated that whether they were bound for hell, another place, or even if it gained infinite lives, he hoped they would meet again. He expressed his desire for a fair fight next time, marking a moment of respect and anticipation for a future encounter. After that, he sat down on the floor, exhausted but glad that he managed to defeat the elite demon somehow. He was frustrated that he had been killed twice again, even though he had gotten stronger. He then looked at his cracked sword and was surprised to see it shattered. He realized he needed a sturdier sword and stood up, knowing that he should gather some money by collecting the magic stones so he could buy a new weapon. He then grabbed the magic stones scattered around the place. A moment later, he arrived at the magic tower, Hermes, which is on the 1st floor in the safe area. At the entrance of each floor of the magic tower, there is a section where monsters do not appear, known as the safe area, where adventurers can rest. Also, while exploring the magic tower, they may obtain equipment and items. Additionally, there are often stalls in the safe area where they can buy and sell these items. After he bought a silver sword, he thought it wouldn't break easily but was dismayed because its price was high, and most of the stones he had gathered earlier were almost gone. However, he convinced himself it was worth it because he was going to rise from there. While he was busy thinking of the sword as an initial investment, he heard people whispering behind him. He looked back and saw challengers laughing and whispering that he was fooled into buying infinite revival and pitying him. He understood that for them, he was just a pitiful challenger who was sold a worthless skill. Angry, he told everyone that since they all knew about it, they should have told him before he got fooled. However, he knows infinite revival might just be considered trash to other challengers, but for him, who obtained the inversion skill, it was undoubtedly a god-tier skill. He smiled, thinking it was a skill that only he could master, and wondered if it sounded kind of cool. Suddenly, he heard someone shout loudly, making him look back in panic, and saw a chubby man with his minions arrogantly asking if he didn't say he'd challenge the mid-boss room on the 5th floor. The chubby man then introduced himself as the Dominator, Nagishi, making him frustrated when he realized who it was. Dominator is a title given to those who challenge the boss room at the top of the magic tower, and the magic tower disappears once the boss on the top floor is defeated. Those who defeat the boss can obtain powerful, unique equipment, and he knows that dominators are usually respected by ordinary challengers. However, Nagishi is somewhat arrogant, but he is surprised to see the person arguing with Nagishi. The lady angrily asks Nagishi if she was right that he was just a person who happened to challenge a low-tier magic tower, and shouts to Nagishi that anyone could do the same. Shiramachi Yuri, who was level 13, tried to stop Sekiyamana, who was level 15, and told her that fighting wasn't a good idea. However, Mana told Yuri to let go of her, arguing that they had found the mid-boss room first. Mana also questioned Yuri if it was really okay to let that fake dominator snatch away their rewards for clearing the dungeon. Yuri replied that the rewards for clearing the mid-boss room were tempting, but the dangers were numerous, and leaving it to Nagishi and the others might be a good idea, which rendered Mana silent. Nagishi, teasingly, told Mana that it looked like the conversation was settled, which irritated Mana. Nagishi then proudly told them that they, as little girls, should just keep quiet and watch, boasting that the unique equipment bestowed upon him as a dominator, Aegis Mimeses, could block any attacks. Nagishi and his minions then teased the girls with laughter, but then someone called Yuri and Mana from behind. They saw it was him, but Nagishi walked past the ladies and stared at him. Nagishi smiled teasingly and shouted that it was none other than Takamichi. Nagishi then told him that they say he got duped by that shady merchant into buying some worthless skill and asked him if it was pathetic to be the one being exploited. However, he kept his silence and sighed. He then suggested to the ladies that they give the mid-boss to Nagishi and the others, which shocked Mana and led her to ask why even he agreed. He told Mana to calm down and explained that afterward, the three of them would challenge the boss room at the top with speed that even Nagishi and the others couldn't keep up with. Yuri asked him what he was saying, and he explained to them that he wasn't just saying random stuff, he had a proper plan to win. Nagishi was angered upon hearing his words and called him mother fudge in anger, but he just peeked back and saw Nagishi launching an attack on him while shouting at him not to say that he was bullying him. However, he easily dodged Nagishi's attacks. He then tripped Nagishi, causing Nagishi to be confused. Nagishi then fell to the ground. Nagishi's minions rushed to him and asked if he was okay, while Nagishi was confused and asked what had just happened. Nagishi then saw a shadow behind him, and he asked Nagishi how long he was going to keep rolling around. He then laughingly told everyone that since they were all there, he wanted to see Dominator Nagishi's great skill in challenging the mid-boss. He then turned around and asked them if they should go. A moment later, they arrived at the magic tower, Hermes, on the 4th floor. Mana called him from behind and, with a tone of worry, asked if it was safe to follow Nagishi. She explained that her concern stemmed from the fact that, as he knows, Nagishi isn't that strong. Yuri chimed in, sharing her worries as well, pointing out that the monsters they've encountered up to now have been really strong. If they get caught up in a fight, it could spell their end. However, he reassured them calmly that it would be fine. Mana and Yuri, challengers whom he met in the magic tower, are well aware that Mana is level 15 and Yuri is level 13, whereas he, being level 8, is comparatively weaker. Naturally, their concern was understandable. Yet, he knew that his current self, regardless of his level, had significantly increased in status. So, if they got into a fight, he was confident he could take them all down. Nagishi then teasingly called to him, saying it was fine to observe how they would defeat the mid-boss, but he'd be on his own against the lesser enemies. He couldn't believe Nagishi was being arrogant again, especially since he had seemed a bit scared earlier. He guessed that Nagishi had managed to pull himself together. Suddenly, the floor shook and they heard a loud growling sound. A monster then appeared behind Nagishi and attacked. But fortunately, Nagishi blocked the attack with his shield in time. Nagishi tried to attack the monster, but it jumped away in time and landed a distance away from Nagishi. The lizard man then stood up and growled angrily at them. Nagishi, undaunted, smiled, thinking that a single lizard man should be easy to handle. However, he warned Nagishi to wait, sensing that something was wrong. Suddenly, a swarm of eyes emerged from above them, and lizard men jumped down, surrounding them. Nagishi shouted in confusion, wondering why there were so many lizard men. Then, a differently colored monster emerged from the darkness and walked toward them, while the lizard men bowed to it. It was the lizard commander, a superior species of lizard man, commanding the swarm. The lizard commander teasingly pointed its weapon at them, and the lizard men jumped at them to attack. Initially surprised, he then smiled excitedly. Mana shouts to Yuri that they should protect him, to which Yuri agrees. The two ladies then position themselves at his back and front to protect him. He shouts back, assuring them that it's okay and he can fight too, but Mana insists he not act tough in a situation like this. He looks at Mana, confused, and she explains that those opponents are completely out of his league, which frustrates him. Yuri then calls out to him, expressing concern over the danger, and advises him to fall back. While Mana, Yuri, and the men were fighting around him, he tried to convince them that he could also fight, reaching out to them. But he stopped, realizing everyone considered him just a liability, and wondered about the unsettling feeling he was experiencing. On the other hand, Nagishi was busy attacking lizard men when the lizard commander dashed in front of him and attempted to decapitate him. Fortunately, Nagishi blocked the attack in time but was thrown away instead. Nagishi managed to land safely, but accidentally activated a tile that was a trap. Suddenly, the floor beneath him collapsed, and he fell, cursing. The ladies called out his name worriedly, but he questioned why he was the one falling and not Nagishi. He knows that the magic tower Hermes, as the name suggests, is filled with countless traps that challenge the adventurer's survival. However, traps like these no longer pose a threat to him. He noticed the floor he was about to slam into but managed to descend safely by jumping from pillar to pillar. He stood up, relieved to not have a single injury, but then turned around upon hearing a growl from behind and saw a swarm of lizard commanders. Realizing there were many lizard man commanders and no way to run, he questioned if they intended not to let him escape. He then pulled something from his storage, confronting the lizard commanders with the declaration that he had had enough and was tired of all these traps. The lizard commanders were stunned by his presence as he challenged them to come at him, stating it didn't matter how many there were, it would merely serve as a test for his new sword. He also warned them they would soon realize their mistake. Swiftly, he pierced through the swarm of lizard commanders, telling them they would witness the consequences of bringing him to that place and referring to them as shitty lizards. The lizard commanders began to encircle him, reminding him that all the lizard men present were of a higher rank, and until recently, they were opponents he certainly couldn't have beaten. One of the lizard commanders leaped towards him to attack, but he calmly positioned his sword. When the lizard commander brought his sword down in an attack, he counterattacked with his sword, leaving the lizard commander stunned. He then swung his sword back and sliced the lizard commander in half while proclaiming that he could now defeat them. Two more lizard commanders jumped above him to strike him down, but he rolled in the air to dodge their attacks. When the two lizard commanders faced each other, he beheaded them with a single swipe of his sword while landing. Catching his breath, he sternly questioned the remaining lizard commanders about their hesitation, mocking them to try and kill him if they could, which only angered them further. However, he charged towards them and easily dispatched them with his sword. He realized that he could properly engage with that number of opponents and that he was no longer the person who needed protection. After eliminating a swarm of lizard men, he addressed the retreating lizard men, asserting that they were frightened of death. He confessed understanding their fear as he had experienced death himself, which is why he promised to end them swiftly. The lizard commander, now shivering and crying in fear, witnessed his resolve. A moment later, after taking a deep breath from finishing off all of them, he noticed a staircase leading to another floor. He approached the stairs, knowing it was time to ascend from there. After a considerable journey to the stairs, the door on the 4th floor opened, and he stepped inside. Exhausted from the repetitive cycle of climbing up and tumbling down floors, he was met with astonishment by the ladies who rushed to his side. Yuri, with evident concern, approached him to check for any injuries, her inspection revealing none, which made her sigh in relief. She expressed her relief and her desire to have been of assistance, lamenting her inability to find any paths leading downward. Mana, equally concerned, questioned the plausibility of his solo journey, inquiring if he had encountered any monster attacks along the way. Surprised by their reaction, he reassured them that there were no issues, concealing the fact that he had slain a swarm of lizard man commanders on another floor. Curious about the fate of Nagishi and the others, he inquired after them. Yuri hesitated, but Mana disclosed that after his descent into the hole, she managed to fend off a group of lizard men. Meanwhile, Nagishi, presuming him dead, hastened towards the boss room. Mana expressed her irritation, noting the irony that Nagishi, the trigger of the trap, remained unscathed while he suffered the fall. He, however, urged her not to dwell in anger, reminding her that Nagishi's behavior was typical. Turning to Mana and Yuri with earnest gratitude for their concern, he elicited a puzzled yet warm smile from both ladies. With a bashful demeanor, he suggested they expedite their pursuit, hinting at the possibility of catching up with Nagishi and the others. However, his urgency turned to shock upon noticing a lizard man lurking behind the ladies, prompting speculation about its association with the creatures Nagishi and the others had failed to vanquish. The situation escalated quickly as the lizard commander lunged at Yuri. In a frantic attempt to protect her, he called out her name while reaching to intercept. As Yuri raised her gaze, the lizard commander launched an attack with its sword. He ceased his run upon realizing it might be too late, then bent down and leapt, fortuitously blocking the lizard man's attack with his sword just in time. Yuri, taken aback by his sudden appearance, watched as Mana engaged the lizard commander, insisting they leave it to her. She then slashed the lizard commander's chest with her dagger and looked back, warning him of the danger, but he merely sighed, sheathing his sword back into his inventory. Yuri awkwardly approached him, expressing her gratitude for the rescue. He shyly acknowledged that he was glad to have arrived in time. Amidst their awkward conversation, Mana, observing them with a smile, inquired how he managed to counter the attack. With a smirk, he suggested that perhaps he could indeed be useful, asserting that he was no longer merely dead weight. Moments later, they reached the Magic Tower Hermes' 5th floor. While the two ladies engaged in conversation behind him, he checked his status and discovered a remarkable increase of 2 levels following his confrontation with a multitude of lizardmen commanders. He recognized that the enhancement in his status wasn't due to a buff or debuff, indicating that it wasn't subject to reversal. He also noted a significant improvement in his stats, pondering the magnitude of this increase given the nature of his recent battles. He observed that the increase in his ATK from the inverted death penalty was 65, starkly contrasting with the modest increase of 2 from his level ups, leading him to conclude that the synergy between the death penalty and inversion was profoundly powerful. Suddenly, Yuri's call drew his attention forward, where he saw the room of the 5th floor mid-boss. Mana shared that the Magic Tower Hermes is believed to encompass 10 floors, placing them at the midpoint of the tower. Given that the conquest of the tower had commenced not long ago, Yuri and she were the pioneers in uncovering this room. However, upon returning to the 1st floor to strategize for the battle, they found themselves ensnared by Nagishi. Mana shouted in anger, exclaiming that just thinking about the situation infuriated her. Yuri attempted to pacify Mana once more, and he informed them that Nagishi and his group should be just ahead. He pushed the door open, imparting that no amount of preparation or strategy could fully anticipate a mid-boss's challenge, underlining the seriousness required. As he stepped inside, a man was suddenly thrown into the air, unnoticed by him until it was too late. The man crashed against the wall with a hard slam but, fortunately, remained alive. Turning his attention forward, Nagishi noticed their arrival. He acknowledged his survival and directed attention to the mid-boss guarding the room. The Orc Lord, enraged, leaped towards Nagishi in attack. He called out to Nagishi with concern, but Nagishi dismissively assured him that he required no concern from his likes. As the Orc Lord brought down its axe, Nagishi blocked the strike with his shield, boasting that an attack of such caliber couldn't penetrate his Aegis Mimesis. Nagishi managed to repel the Orc Lord's axe, causing the creature to kneel from imbalance. Nagishi explained that the group battle with the lizardmen caught him off guard with a surprise attack, but in a one-on-one confrontation, he had no intention of losing. Nagishi then cautioned him not to look away, promising to demonstrate that he was on a completely different level compared to small fry like him. Yuri approached the man who had been thrown to inquire if he was okay, to which he replied that, somehow, he was. The man then marveled at Nagishi's prowess, noting that despite being sent flying by just one attack, Nagishi stood unflinching. The Orc Lord swung its axe at Nagishi, who merely used his shield to block the attack. Nagishi remained steadfast, his footing pierced into the floor from the force of the Orc Lord's blow, yet he teased the creature with a smile, provoking it into a furious scream. The Orc Lord then lifted its axe, gathering force for a series of powerful, directional swings at Nagishi. Exhausted and catching its breath, the Orc Lord was taken aback when Nagishi mocked the true power of a mid-boss, teasingly questioning if a creature like it posed any real challenge. As the Orc Lord persisted in its futile attempts to strike Nagishi, he, observing from a distance, speculated on the shield's origin, presumably a reward from a boss within the Magic Tower and its unique power. He acknowledged that Nagishi's personal stats might not be exceptional, but the shield enabled Nagishi to fend off the mid-boss's attacks effortlessly. With another attack from the Orc Lord, Negishi nonchalantly remarked on the simplicity of its tactics. He then used his shield to push the Orc Lord back, signaling his minions to engage. They swiftly attacked the Orc Lord's flanks, causing it significant pain. Negishi seized the moment to leap above the Orc Lord, scolding it for its vulnerability, and forcefully striking its head with his shield. The Orc Lord, overcome with pain, fell defeated. Negishi then turned, mockingly inquiring how the spectacle was received, boastfully crediting the victory to the true power of a challenger. He smiled, acknowledging the significant advantage conferred by unique equipment. Negishi, delighted by the acknowledgement, laughed off the suggestion that they, as lesser challengers, could have managed to defeat a mid-boss, urging them to show gratitude towards him, the great Negishi. At that moment, another man urgently pointed out something behind Negishi, urging him to look at the astonishing sight. Negishi turned, only to find himself shocked by the presence of a huge treasure chest. Negishi, overcome with excitement, rushed to the treasure chest, proclaiming the certainty of finding a super rare item within. Embracing the chest, he declared it superior even to the one that had contained the Aegis Mimesis. But then Yoshito, haunted by the memory of previous traps and puzzled over the presence of such a remarkable chest as a reward for a 5th floor mid-boss, he called out to Negishi, urging caution, aware that even a moment's inattention could trigger the tower's notorious traps. As Negishi opened the treasure chest, disappointment struck when he found it empty. This frustration quickly turned to shock as a massive magic circle materialized above them. He shielded his face, eyes reflexively shutting as a bright light enveloped them. In mere seconds, they found themselves teleported elsewhere within the tower. Upon regaining his bearings, he queried their new location. Mana and Yuri, equally alarmed, confirmed they were no longer in the mid-boss room. Negishi's shout of disbelief echoed through the space, prompting him to call out Negishi's name in confusion. Negishi, stricken with horror, revealed he had felt this ominous atmosphere only once before. Asked to specify their whereabouts, Negishi disclosed they were on the magic tower's top floor. As a purple magic power circle formed in front of them, a man of imposing stature appeared seated upon a throne, signaling to everyone, as Negishi pointed out, that they had inadvertently entered the boss room. The boss then opens its eyes and unleashes a scream, causing the room to shake uncontrollably. He couldn't believe they were actually in the boss room, but then a system pop-up appeared in front of them, warning that they were in the Magic Tower Hermes, top floor, and that forced teleportation to the boss room was confirmed. Upon reading the system message, he realized that the boss in front of them was the master of the Magic Tower, the Ogre Emperor. Suddenly, the Emperor dashed towards them, appearing above at incredible speed. He swung down his sword, breaking the floor in the process, but fortunately, they all dodged in time. He realized that the Ogre Emperor was on a different level than any enemy he had faced before and, except for him, their stats weren't enough, which meant they couldn't fight the Ogre Emperor head-on. He shouted to them to get back and that he would handle it, but Negishi shouted back at him not to spew nonsense and to stay quiet, or else he would get himself killed. He was going to explain that even if he died, he would be revived, but before he could explain, Negishi dashed towards the Emperor while shouting to his men to attack. The man swung his sword and hit the Emperor's feet, and the other men also struck the Emperor. The man was confident that their attack was a sure hit, but the Emperor didn't even get scratched by it and raised his sharp claws to attack back. But then, Negishi shoutingly ran towards him and shouted not to underestimate him, the Dominator, Negishi. However, when the Emperor swung his claws down at Negishi, he was slashed, his shield shattering into pieces, leaving everyone stunned in horror and shock. Yoshito was also stunned, recalling Negishi's assurance that his Aegis Mimesis could defend against any type of attack. However, the system displayed a message to everyone stating that due to insufficient stats, the ability of Aegis Mimesis could not be activated. This left him staring in disbelief at the lifeless Negishi on the ground, pondering the system's message. The man rushed to Negishi in worry, but Yoshito urged them to get away from there. Confused, he hesitated, and it was too late. The Emperor bisected him with a swift slash of his sword, killing him instantly. He clenched his trembling hand and bit his lip in anger, facing the Ogre Emperor with determination. As the Emperor advanced towards them, Mana and Yuri, paralyzed with horror, insisted that they should flee. Mana glanced towards the door, shouting that they could still run, only to be shocked to find that the door was sealed with magic, blocking their escape. Yuri, tears streaming down her face in fear, asked if they were going to die there as well, as the Emperor pulled his sword back, gathering force for another strike. He aimed it down at Yuri, who was too petrified to move. Accepting her fate, she closed her eyes. Suddenly, someone dashed in front of her, blocking the Emperor's attack with his sword, leaving the ladies utterly stunned. He declared that he wouldn't let anyone else die from that point on, swearing to make it happen, even at the cost of his own life. The Emperor tried to attack him once again, but he managed to jump away to avoid it. He then leaped and slashed at the Emperor's chest, but noticed his attack was shallow. The Emperor countered with incredible speed, appearing above him and shocking him. It then swung its sword down, shattering the floor, but fortunately, he managed to dodge in time. He ran back towards the Emperor at full speed and attempted to strike its head, but the Emperor blocked his attack. Yuri asked Mana what was happening, and Mana could hardly believe that Yoshito was fighting the boss one-on-one. Despite being enhanced by the death penalty, he was still being pushed back by the Emperor, a testament to the boss's strength. Realizing he lacked the necessary stats to defeat the Emperor, he decided to focus on depleting the Emperor's stamina first. He taunted the Emperor, declaring he would kill it after dying a few times himself. After a swift dash, they engaged in a fierce one-on-one battle, during which Yoshito managed to strike the Emperor's head repeatedly, provoking its anger. The Emperor retaliated, and Yoshito, recognizing his limit, allowed the Emperor to kill him with its claws. Before his body hit the ground, he saw Yuri, stunned and horrified, scream as the system announced his death. As a death penalty, a permanent debuff of 55 agility was applied, which, due to his inversion skill, became a bonus of plus 55 agility. He reassured Yuri, telling her it was all good because he would continue to revive until the Emperor was defeated. Mana mentioned the infinite revival, but Yuri pointed out that using it triggered significant negative effects, leaving them wondering how he could still fight. After being killed by the Emperor again, his res increased by 20, and after another death, his HP increased by 320. However, he knew these stats were not what he needed. He then fervently wished for a stat increase that could deal fatal damage to enemies. Waiting for the Emperor's attack, it killed him instantly. He opened his eyes quickly, sitting up from his prone position. Catching his breath, he looked at his hand and then placed it on his face, expecting the excruciating pain of death to drive him mad. However, he smiled, realizing his desired stat had increased. His attack had increased by 140. Delighted by the significant increase, he noticed another system update, indicating that he had unlocked the ability to specify a respawn point due to reaching a certain level of proficiency with the infinite revival skill. Curious, he accessed the system for a more detailed explanation. Understanding its utility, he grinned, recognizing how useful it would be. He then stood up, ready to be revived once more. He spawned back to life, prepared for the next phase of the battle. While being spawned, he guesses the new feature is probably to prevent him from getting stuck. If he were unable to respawn anywhere other than exactly where he had died, there would be a large number of cases where he would just die again. But if he were able to choose his respawn point, he should be able to escape a death loop. He then walks to the side of the Emperor, knowing that if it was on the battlefield, just like it could be used to get to his opponent's blind spot. He stops behind the Emperor's back, bends down ready to be revived, and jumps behind the Emperor while shouting that this time, it's his turn to kill the Emperor. He then hits the Emperor with his sword from behind, making it shout in pain. Mana shouts in disbelief that he moved to the back in just a moment, making him confused and wonder if that was how it seemed to them. The Emperor then looked back and swung his sword at him, but he bowed his head down in time to avoid it while shouting that Nagishi and those men were a nasty bunch, but still, he never thought for a single time that they deserved to die. He then asks if he is right that by defeating the boss of a magic tower, he can get his hands on a unique item, but tells them that right now, what he desires even more than that is the Emperor's life. The Emperor once again attacked him with its sword, but the Emperor was shocked to see that he dodged it and shattered its sharp claws. He then swung his sword forward to the Ogre Emperor, who was sweating in fear, and successfully hit it in the head, making it shout in pain and lie on the ground. Defeated. He exhaled in relief and put his sword back in his inventory. The system showed him that he had defeated the boss of the magic tower, Hermes, and the conquest reward was a unique piece of equipment and magic stones that had been sent to his inventory. He was happy about the reward he got but had mixed feelings about it. Suddenly, Yuri hugged him from behind and thanked God that he was safe, but then realized her action and walked away while apologizing to him in shyness. He told Yuri that it was fine, and Mana thanked him. Mana tells him that if he hadn't defeated the boss, Yuri and she would definitely have died, but worriedly tells him that the way he was fighting is too reckless and sacrificing himself like that over and over again is painful to watch. She then apologized to him that even though he saved them, she was complaining. He patted her head and told her not to worry about it. He then apologized to her for making her watch him die so many times and tells them that even if he failed over and over again, he would always come back. That said, he then shouts that it was really fucking hurt seriously, and remembers that he has said the same thing somewhere before. Mana stutteringly replies that he was right, tears welling up in her eyes. He then catches his breath and tells them that, as much as possible, he'll do his best not to die. The ladies exchange smiles and both agree with him. Suddenly, their conversation is interrupted when the tower shakes, and then the system notifies them that the boss of the magic tower, Hermes, has been defeated, so the Hermes tower will disappear in 10 seconds, and they will be forcefully relocated. Yuri remembers that after defeating the boss, magic towers disappear. He waves them goodbye and tells them that they should meet again outside. He then looks back at the dead men on the floor and tells them that he won't forget them. He bids them goodbye. On the other hand, from outside, the Hermes tower shook and slowly disappeared until it was gone, as if it never existed. Meanwhile, in some office, a lady asks if the Hermes tower was conquered even though it wasn't supposed to be even half complete yet. A man hands a tablet to the lady and tells her that it was as she said. However, the disappearance of Hermes has been confirmed to be true, and a detailed report on the matter should be arriving soon. The lady puts the tablet down on the table and asks the man if she was right to think it's become somewhat amusing. Before that, on the street, Yoshito woke up and stood up while the people around him were shocked to see that the magic tower Hermes was disappearing. He stared at the tower slowly disappearing in front of everyone, looked at his palm, closed it, and raised it while shouting confidently that he conquered it. He excitedly smiled, but his smile faded away in an instant. He then heard someone asking if the boss of Hermes was really defeated even though it wasn't even supposed to have been explored to the 5th floor yet, and if some strong individual took down the boss while he carefully listened to them. He wants to shout that the one who defeated the boss was him, but he knows he would have been happy to announce it like that if there hadn't been any casualties. He stands up thinking that conquering a magic tower for the first time has really increased his self-confidence. He then tells himself that they should not get too carried away. He peeks back at the people who are in shock and decides to keep it a secret that he is the one who defeated the boss for now because he would stand out too much. He then silently walked away, deciding to quietly get out of there, but then Mana and Yuri noticed him and shouted his name, making him look back in shock. Mana excitedly asked him what kind of unique equipment the one he got from defeating the boss was, making him call Mana an idiot. Upon hearing Mana's words, the challengers stare at him, and they all know that he was definitely the one who got sold by that garbage skill, Infinite Revival, but he was now the dominator of Hermes. Later, he grabbed a drink from a vending machine in some alley, opened it, and was glad that they had finally got away. He remembered the challengers asking him how he defeated the boss, what kind of weapon he used, and asking him to join them while others were clearly annoyed with him. Mana apologized to him and admitted that she had been careless. Yuri told him that taking down the boss of the magic tower and becoming the dominator of Hermes naturally made him the center of attention. He couldn't believe he was a dominator now and told them it felt strange because, not long ago, he was just a weakling challenger, but it seemed that buying the skill stone for Infinite Revival wasn't a mistake after all. Yuri realized something when she heard about Infinite Revival and asked him if it was true that there is a negative effect from dying and how he managed to use it so well. He scratched his head, unsure of what to answer, and wondered how he could even begin to explain about inversion and where he should even start. Yuri told him she wasn't trying to corner him and was just curious about it, so if it was difficult, he didn't need to answer. He agreed and drank his cola, but he knew it wasn't really that big of a deal to explain it to them. Mana told them to put the explanation aside for a moment. She then excitedly looked at him and asked him about the equipment he got as the reward for defeating the boss, making him stutteringly tell her that she was pretty crazy about that kind of stuff. He then threw the can in the trash while telling them to wait for a second and tried to open his status window, but he realized he couldn't open it. Mana told him it was because they were outside of the magic tower. Fundamentally, the window can only be opened while inside a magic tower, and the use of various other things such as stats or skills are also limited to the inside of the magic tower. Because of that system, there aren't incidents of challengers causing problems in normal society. However, there is one exception. The one place where challengers are able to use their power outside of the magic towers would be at the site of the magic towers. He extends his hand at the site of the magic tower and walks inside. When they enter the site of the magic tower Hermes, he tells them he still can't get used to the strange feeling that fills the site of the towers. He then opens his window, and the ladies immediately appear beside him. He tells them that the name of the unique equipment he received as a reward for conquering the tower is Fosaminos. He clicked the item, and a strong light came out from the system, making them all amazed. Then, a sparkling light appeared on his side, and when he opened his hand, a sword slowly appeared on it. He then holds Fosaminos, which is a unique weapon. The ladies were amazed to see the reward for clearing the Tower of Hermes and stared at his Fosaminos for a few minutes. He swung it around, telling them it was quite lightweight and easy to use, making him look forward to the next magic tower conquest. Lana noticed Yuri thinking and hesitating on her side, smiling softly, understanding her feelings, and having an idea. Mana then walked closer to him and asked how about they form a party together from the beginning next time, shocking Yuri. Yuri then raised her hand and shouted that she wanted to join them too. He was momentarily taken aback by Yuri's reaction. Yuri, blushing, put her hand down and shyly asked if she could join them. He smiled and told her that she certainly could because they were already close friends after all. The ladies happily looked at each other and shouted in unison that they did it. Mana then excitedly looked at him, leaned in, and asked which magic tower they should go to next, whether it should be of a similar scale to Hermes or perhaps a larger magic tower. She suggested challenging Zeus, to which Yuri replied that they shouldn't. He thought for a moment while the ladies argued behind him. He then got their attention by saying that after leaving Hermes, there was a place he wanted to visit right away. Yuri, worried, stutteringly asked him where that was, and he replied that it was in Tokyo, at the Challenger's Management Bureau. The ladies, confused, asked him why they're in not a magic tower. He explained to them that, as they knew, the Management Bureau buys magic stones and equipment at higher prices than the magic tower stalls, so he wanted to go there to exchange his items for money. He confessed that after purchasing Infinite Revival, he was completely broke and had even accrued debt, leaving the ladies staring at him in stunned silence. The Tokyo Challenger Management Bureau is a government-operated organization aimed at supporting adventurers. It offers real-time updates on each magic tower. The buying and selling of magic stones and weapons are conducted at fair prices, and unlike the often dubious deals at the magic tower stalls, the Management Bureau is known for its fairness and is highly valued. Additionally, since it's built on the site of a magic tower, there are no restrictions on the power of the challengers, which is another significant feature. Among the rewards for clearing Hermes, there were not only unique weapons but also magic stones, making him hopeful he could make some money. The lady welcomed him and asked if he would like to exchange his magic stones for money, to which he replied yes and opened his inventory. While waiting on the system, he wondered how many magic stones there were. Clicking it, both he and the lady were surprised by the abundance that appeared. He was stunned that there was indeed that many magic stones as part of the rewards for clearing the dungeon. She then stutteringly told him they should proceed with the exchange process, visibly charmed by the quantity. A moment later, with shaking hands, he asked the lady if she was serious, and realized that even with his debt, he was now wealthy. He walked back to Yuri and Mana, excitedly asking them what he should do with the money. Yuri advised that it was probably best to avoid reckless spending, a sentiment Mana agreed with. Mana then warned him not to get carried away and end up back in debt from overspending, a thought that made his dream of extravagance vanish as he replied that he got it. Suddenly, the lady saw him and told him she had found him, making him feel a surge of strong power. She approached him, revealing she had heard of his arrival at the Management Bureau and had come looking for him. She stopped in front of him, and as he faced her, he asked who she was. She introduced herself as Raido Fayun, the chief of Tokyo's Challenger Management Bureau, and asked if she could have a moment of his time. She then seriously addressed him as the dominator of the magic tower Hermes, Takamichi Yoshito. He noticed that Fayun's face was quite familiar to him and remembered that within the Management Bureau that gathers tower challengers, Fayun is known as a monster reputed to be the strongest. He guessed she was scouted to the Management Bureau after conquering 3 magic towers as a challenger and recalled that she even appeared in advertisements for the Bureau. Her face was ubiquitous across the city, but he wondered why she was seeking him out specifically. He then asked her what the president of the Management Bureau wanted with him, and she replied that first, she intended to hold a hearing about how he suddenly conquered the magic tower of Hermes, and second, she aimed to verify the true power of the new dominator. After he recounted everything and followed her, she acknowledged that he was caught in a trap and moved to the boss's room, noting that this information must be reported to the other challengers. She expressed her gratitude for his openness and informed him that regarding Dominator Nagishi and his party, the Management Bureau would ensure to contact their surviving family members. Noticing their silence, she explained that it was not uncommon for people to lose their lives while challenging the magic towers, but it goes without saying that such losses were painful. This left him stunned, and he bit his lip, realizing that they had been telling themselves there was nothing they could do about Nagishi and the others, but the truth was that it was very painful for them. He wiped away his tears, finding some comfort in being able to acknowledge this pain openly. A moment later, he inquired about their location, to which Fayun responded that they were in the Management Bureau's training room. While they were busy looking around, Fayun called his name and threw something at him, which he caught. It was a sword, but he noted it felt a bit dull. She explained it was the type of sword used in the Management Bureau's training hall and told him that from now on, he could use it. She then thrust another object into the floor and declared she would allow him to fight her, stating that properly understanding the true power of dominators was also the responsibility of the chief of the bureau. He acknowledged that refusing Fayun's challenge seemed impossible, but Mana's encouragement to assert his dominance by claiming he'd send the bureau chief flying made him laugh, albeit forcefully. He mused over Mana's confidence, then gripped the sword tighter, resolving to face the challenge with utmost seriousness. "If I'm to do this, I might as well give it my all," he declared. Fayun inquired if he was ready, and with a firm yes, he braced himself. Aware that his adversary was the formidable chief of the management bureau, he couldn't help but think he might present a tougher challenge than she anticipated, given his conquest of a towering boss. "Let's begin," Fayun announced. To his shock, she vanished from sight only to reappear beside him like a gust of wind, launching a swift strike that he narrowly evaded by bending away. Fayun pressed on, her onslaught of attacks relentless. Despite his efforts to dodge and block, her speed was overwhelming, forcing him to retreat while parrying her strikes. Eventually, he tumbled and leaped back, creating distance. Panic set in when he sensed her presence right behind him. With a quick turn and dash, he evaded her surprise attack from behind. Gasping for breath and grappling with the realization of Fayun's overpowering strength, he reflected on his journey. He had overcome the boss through repeated deaths, yet here he stood, facing a dominator who had conquered magic towers without succumbing once. The disparity in their abilities was stark, yet it wasn't the moment to dwell on differences or let frustration take hold. "If defense alone won't cut it, I'll turn the tables by embracing the very risk of death that others shy away from," he thought. Fayun, mid-attack, found herself taken aback as he boldly announced the start of his offensive, charging forward to meet her in the center of the room. She slowed down upon seeing it and tightly grasped her sword. When he noticed this, he lifted his sword backward to gain force and swung it down at her while shouting that he was faster now. However, she dodged it easily and positioned herself for an attack. He couldn't believe it and was thrown back by her attack, growling in pain. She told him it was unexpected. Landing on the floor, he retorted that against a regular monster or person, she would be able to evade her opponent's attacks with no problem, and he launched another attack at her. She effortlessly blocked his attack and counterattacked, which he avoided, telling her that just now, if she hadn't hesitated, it would have been a one-sided fight. She rolled her sword in her hand and swung at him, but he jumped away, landing at a distance from her. He told her that she thought he was defenseless and hesitated for a moment to attack him with her sword. But he didn't think it was just her being kind to him because he was acting in a way she didn't understand. So, he thought her hand simply froze out of instinct. However, he also took a chance, and the reason is that he has infinite revival. He then dashed toward her, apologizing for playing unfairly. She blocked his sword, and he explained that without doing so, there was no way an ordinary person could win against her. She pushed him away when she retracted her sword and dodged his attack, remembering that she had received a report on infinite revival and that Yoshito could return from death endlessly, moving forward without fear of death. She appeared closer to him, pondering that Yoshito's skill was a fearsome ability. She then struck Yoshito with the sword handle in the face, sending him flying, and warned him it wouldn't happen a second time. He cursedly said that it hurt, but then he stared at her, and she was shocked when he managed to point his sword close to her chest. He then told her that compared to dying, her attack didn't hurt at all. She stared at him seriously for a moment and smiled. She then turned around and told him she understood his power now and would acknowledge her loss this time. But she stopped talking when he collapsed to the floor. She bent down closer to him in confusion, and he shakily told her he didn't care who won or lost, but he needed medical treatment. He then passed out, and his soul emerged from his body, causing Yuri and Mana to rush to him, worried. In a panic, Mana urged Yuri to quickly push his soul back, which Yuri did in an attempt to save him. A moment later, he awoke and realized he had almost died. Fayun reminded him that he hadn't actually died, which made him exclaim to her that that wasn't the point. He took a deep breath to calm himself and told her that since they had fought, it should be settled, and he asked if he could now return. However, she replied no, telling him that they still needed to have an important conversation. He asked what she meant by that, and she explained that, as the chief of the management bureau, she had verified his true power exceeded that of an average member. Because of this, she wished to extend a special request to him. Yuri inquired about the nature of a special request from the chief of the bureau, and Mana added that it was the one rumored to offer an absolutely amazing reward. Fayun informed him that the reward could be given in cash, believing it to be an amount that would fully satisfy him. He expressed his appreciation for her offer but asked for the details of the request. She revealed that a few hours ago, the Management Bureau had verified the appearance of a new tower. Currently, the entrance was being sealed off, so she wanted him to enter that tower and gather information about it. She further explained that it was the preliminary investigation of the Mage Tower, Persephone, and it was a request she could only entrust to him. He questioned whether it wasn't standard procedure for the Management Bureau to investigate whenever a new magic tower appeared and why she specifically wanted him to undertake this task. She explained that they had already dispatched challengers from the Management Bureau, 2 parties of 5, making a total of 10 people, but not a single one had returned. Yuri, worriedly, asked if truly not even one person returned. Mana, incredulous, suggested that surely it couldn't be true. Fayun admitted that she too initially doubted the news but had to accept it as fact when the search team they sent afterwards found every single one of the dispatched challengers dead near the entrance. They all seemed to be desperately trying to escape, yet looked as though they ran out of energy just a step away from the exit. He asked her to wait a moment, questioning if he was correct in assuming the area near the entrance should be a safe zone, to which she agreed. He pointed out that monsters shouldn't appear in a safe area and questioned why they would die there. She responded that the bodies of the challengers bore no wounds from monster attacks, leaving the cause of death uncertain. Upon receiving the report, she had only requested the retrieval of their bodies, calling back the search team immediately due to the dangerous implications and their lack of understanding regarding the cause of death. She then informed him that this was the current situation at the Magic Tower Persephone. He sighed, realizing that because of his infinite revival ability, she wanted to offer him that special request. She cautioned him not to misunderstand, as she had no intention of carelessly risking his life. However, she also couldn't permit any more deaths within the Management Bureau. She then walked closer to him, asking seriously if he would accept the request for her sake. He looked at her silently for a moment, sighed, and replied that he understood. Later, in the Mage Tower Persephone, he enters the safe area. He inhales deeply and slaps himself to gather his thoughts. He then swore that he would identify the cause of death of the challengers, feeling the urgent need to alleviate everyone's worries, especially recalling Yuri crying and pleading with him not to die. He opened his inventory, determined to move forward, and took out his item, knowing they were relying on him. He then grabbed his foe's Amino's sword and proceeded deeper into the tower. In the hallway, skeleton monsters roamed, but he dashed behind them, startling the skeletons and easily killing them with a single strike. He noticed that his foe's Amino's was light and easy to swing, but he had expected it to be unique equipment. He was about to test out the unique ability of his foe's Aminos when purple smoke appeared behind him. He felt the power of the smoke but realized it too late as the smoke enveloped him. He tried to cover his face as the smoke approached, swinging his sword continuously in front of him while yelling at the smoke to get away. However, the system pop-ups appeared, and he was shocked to read what they displayed. After reading, he understood the cause of all the challengers' deaths. It was the abnormal condition known as the Curse of Persephone, which had now afflicted him, causing him to face death in 120 seconds. His breathing became labored as seconds passed, but he knew it was the right decision to involve him, acknowledging that a normal challenger would have panicked in such a situation. He knew that if they could leave the Magic Tower, any abnormal conditions, buffs, and debuffs would be cancelled. The dispatched challengers, afflicted by the curse, would have frantically made their way to the exit. Yet, despite reaching the safe area, the curse took effect just one step away from it. He realized it made sense that there were no injuries on the bodies because the cause of death was that abnormal condition. He was surprised when the purple smoke rose in front of him, but it then slowly drifted to the side and hurried away, leaving him alone. Realizing that after transferring the curse onto him, it had completed its task, he became infuriated and yelled at it not to underestimate him. It goes without saying that against his infinite revival ability, the curse's effects would be inverted. The curse then reversed, fully restoring his condition. Smiling, he thanked the curse and chased after it, shouting that because of the curse, his body was in perfect condition. He looked in the direction where the cursed smoke had retreated, wondering if he should give chase. Upon reaching the entrance of the room surrounded by the cursed smoke, he realized that normal challengers wouldn't stand a chance against the tower. He walked into the room, noticing the fog thickening, and was shocked to see a huge pot of purple water in the center. He deduced that it must be the source of the cursed smoke. Suddenly, a sharp magic ball was thrown at him, but he narrowly avoided it by turning his head to the side just in time. When it hit the wall, it exploded, and then a monster emerged from the pod. It was the cursed spring gatekeeper, which threw numerous magic balls at him. He easily dodged them while retrieving his foe's Aminos from his inventory. It shook in anger upon seeing him avoid its attack and screamed in anger. Thick smoke then rose up from the pod, shocking him. It hurled the cursed smoke at him and clapped its 4 hands in excitement, eager to see him suffer. He understood that it controlled the cursed smoke and its killing intent was literally overflowing due to its overlapping curses. Suddenly, a skeleton appeared behind him, ready to slash him, but he turned around and cut the skeleton in half just in time. He then noticed that the cursed spring gatekeeper had called for more monsters. Skeletons rushed at him from all sides, and he tried his best to block them and fend them off on his own. But one skeleton found an opening and slashed him from behind. He fell to the ground, hurt, and collapsed in his own blood. The cursed spring gatekeeper laughed happily upon seeing him apparently dead, but he, smiling, asked it if it could afford to be so relaxed. Then, his inversion reversed all of his curses, fully restoring his condition. He then rose again and eliminated all of the skeletons in his way at speed, taunting the cursed spring gatekeeper by asking if it wasn't too bad and telling it that the magic tower's curse was nothing but the highest quality recovery medicine for him. He then slashed the cursed spring gatekeeper to pieces with his foes' aminos. Afterwards, he heard the water in the pod change, and when he looked down, he noticed that the spring's curse had disappeared. Later, in the Challenger's Management Bureau, Tokyo branch, Fayun told him that she now understood that what killed the Challengers in the Magic Tower Persephone was the abnormal condition of that curse. However, she couldn't believe there was a curse that causes death and asked him if there was anything they could do about that curse. He threw something at her and told her that it was the best countermeasure for it. She caught the bottle with blue liquid and asked him what it was while waiting for the system to identify it. He explained to her that after he defeated the monster that appeared from the cursed spring, the spring was purified, and he got his hands on it. The system then showed her that it was Persephone's holy water, capable of dispelling the curse of Persephone. After using it, they would be immune to new curses for 600 seconds. He told her that if the challengers used Persephone's holy water and went in, even normal challengers should be able to advance without dying. He also told her that he only went up to the 3rd floor, but it seemed there was a cursed spring on every floor. That is when he properly understood that Persephone is a magic tower that they have to climb by purifying the cursed springs and securing the holy water. Fayun smiled upon hearing his report and respectfully thanked him. She then told him that if the warning signs and countermeasures were understood, Persephone Tower could be opened up even to regular challengers. She then grabbed something on the table while telling him that he had completed her request and praised him for doing a great job. She then put a lot of money in front of him, and when she was done, he cursed in shock because it was a lot more than he expected. She asked him if it was not enough, and he immediately replied that it was enough. A moment later, he was in the street, walking, and people looked at him confusedly. He was holding a bag, thinking that together with the rewards he got from the Hermes Tower, they were a ridiculous amount, making him sweatily wonder what he should spend them on. A few days later, he had fully repaid the debt from buying Infinite Revival. Even so, there was a lot of the reward left over, so he decided to go to a luxury brand store and buy expensive things for himself. He looked up at the bright sky and noticed that his new luxury items felt different to him. Suddenly, he heard Mana shoutingly call Yuri and tell her that she heard anyone is allowed to enter Persephone now, so they should invite Yoshito and challenge it together. He panicked when he saw them and walked forward, hoping they hadn't noticed him. The ladies walked past him, and he sighed in relief as they continuously walked away. But then, Mana looked back, noticing him. He immediately looked away in panic, but Mana stared at him and was shocked to recognize him. She then asked if it was really him, and he shouted at her not to act so grossed out. He then shoutedly explained that he suddenly got a lot of money and had no idea how to spend it. Yuri awkwardly told him that she thinks he looks cool, but he told her that even if she was trying to be considerate, it didn't feel good at all. Mana told him that they should put the strange outfit aside for now, making him tell Mana that she was so mean. Mana then told him that they should make an attempt at Persephone together, but he just asked Mana why she was so interested in it when it was supposed to be a pretty dangerous magic tower. Mana replied that magic stones altered by the cursed fog should sell for a ton, so any challenger confident in their abilities would be heading there. Yuri told them that according to the report from the Management Bureau, the challengers had already pushed to the 10th floor in only a few days and asked them if wasn't it an abnormal pace. Mana then shouted at him that it was unfair that only he became rich and he should help them earn some money too. Yuri then shyly told him that she'd be happy to go to any magic tower as long as she can go with him. He thought as long as they bring some holy water, there shouldn't be any risk of death, and asked them if they should join the attack on Persephone, which the ladies agreed to. But he told them that before that, he should probably change his clothes. Meanwhile, in the Persephone Magic Tower, challengers lay dead on the floor with open eyes and Persephone's holy water unused. Someone in a cape holding a scythe floated in the air above them, and it was a powerful skeleton monster. Later, in the Magic Tower Persephone, on the 10th floor, a skeleton monster launched its sword to attack, but Yoshito, wielding his foe's Amino's sword, blocked it. He glared at the skeleton and easily slashed it into pieces, which increased his level to 16. Mana clapped and told him that he had become really strong now, while Yuri stared at him in silence. He told them that after killing all kinds of monsters, it was natural for his level to rise. He then walked toward them, knowing that it wouldn't make much of a difference in his stats, but if his level was too low, people would start probing about it, and he realized that he should try to raise it a bit more. Just then, the system popped up at his side and warned him that only 60 seconds remained for the effect of Persephone's holy water. Yuri told them that the curse nullification effect of the holy water would wear off soon, and Mana said that since that level's spring had already been purified, she didn't think they would get cursed. first. However, she took out holy water and told him that he should use the holy water again, just in case. He agreed and turned around. He knew that if he used the holy water and it got affected by his inversion, he would be cursed instead. He peeked back at the ladies and thought that he couldn't find the right time to tell them about his inversion and decided to explain it soon. He turned around to call them, but he was shocked to see a monster approaching them from above. He shouted to warn them, but it was too late because the skeleton grabbed Yuri and dragged her away, leaving them in shock. Mana worriedly shouted to Yuri, and Yuri dropped her holy water when she was dragged. The skeleton stopped to face them while still holding Yuri. The side the skeleton was holding released a purple cursed smoke that wrapped around Yuri, and he panicked when he noticed it. The system then popped up in front of Yuri, warning her that the curse of Persephone had been granted to her and she would die in 120 seconds. He realized that it was a monster that could curse them, and he couldn't believe that they had just run into it when the holy water's effects wore off. He knew that Yuri couldn't take the holy water on her own. Mana rushed at the monster while shouting to Yuri that she would save her. She attacked it multiple times with her dagger, but it effortlessly rolled its scythe's handle to block her attacks. Then, it swung its scythe at her, attacking with such force that, although she managed to block it, she was thrown away. Yuri called out to Mana in worry, and Mana managed to land on the floor, albeit in pain. He then jumped to get closer to the monster, telling Mana to fall back. He launched his sword at the monster, shouting to Mana that he would handle it, but the monster simply blocked his sword. Frustrated, he withdrew his sword and continuously thrust it forward at the monster, which merely glared at him and blocked every attack he launched. He couldn't believe he couldn't break through and realized that the monster wasn't just any minor foe. He then jumped back to his original position, puzzled, knowing that although it was strong, it had only focused on defense. What could it be thinking? Mana told him they needed to hurry because there weren't even 90 seconds left until Yuri's curse took effect. Yuri, shouting, begged the monster to let her go, but she became silent in fear when it glared at her with its red eyes and teased her with a laugh. It then laughed loudly at them, and the system identified it as a soul expunger. He realized its strategy and explained to Mana that the soul expunger waits until the holy water wears off before attacking the challengers, relishing in the fear it causes them. Then, furiously, he told the soul expunger not to underestimate him, and with a call of defiance, he dashed forward to attack it, anger burning in his voice. He swung his foes aminos at the soul expunger's head, but the soul expunger blocked it and laughed, fueling his anger. Suddenly, the monster turned around, still holding Yuri, and fled. Mana rushed to follow, urging him that they should pursue, which he agreed to and chased after it. When it turned to the side and they followed, they were shocked to encounter a swarm of skeleton monsters awaiting them. The soul expunger ordered the skeletons to attack. He told Mana it had lured them there to finish them off. When Mana didn't respond, he asked her what was wrong, questioning if she was scared. She just raised her daggers and replied defiantly, indicating she was getting fired up instead. A skeleton then appeared above her, and she effortlessly slashed it into pieces with her dagger. Moments later, when they were both exhausted from the fight, he asked if she could keep up, to which she confidently replied, of course. They then both dashed toward the soul expunger, easily dispatching every skeleton in their way with remarkable speed. The skeletons on the side, shaking in fear, raised their bows and loosed their arrows toward them. Mana was shocked to see an arrow nearly hit her, but Yoshito managed to swing his sword in time to block them, asking if she was okay. She replied, stutteringly, yes. He clenched his jaw, realizing there were less than 60 seconds left until Yuri's curse took effect. Unleashing his power, he shouted that he would open up a path. He ran toward the center, dispatching skeletons to get closer to the soul expunger and Yuri. Suddenly, the system popped up on his side, revealing a dropped item. It showed that it was a corpse's grudge, which granted the effect of death every 5 seconds when equipped. He smiled, incredulous that such a seemingly useless item existed, and mused whether it was meant as harassment. Then, he grabbed the ring, knowing it wouldn't be equipped by just anyone but him. The system then asked if he wanted to equip the item, to which he clicked yes. The ring appeared on his finger, and the system notified him that the death effect had been granted. He would die in 5 seconds. He knew the ring's effect would be inverted and he'd be fully healed in 5 seconds, so there was no need for him to focus on defending. He then dashed through the swarm of skeleton monsters, jumping from one skeleton's head to another to gain height. When he was above the soul expunger, he declared it was the perfect moment to demonstrate the special attack skill of the foe's aminos. The skill, known as the 7-strike assault, increases in attack power with each strike. If the strikes are interrupted, the skill fails and there is a long cooldown before it can be used again, making the timing critical. The soul expunger swung its scythe at him, cutting his hand, and he screamed in pain. Yuri, in tears, worriedly called his name, but he simply looked at her, and his hand healed at an astonishing speed. He continued to swing his sword down, which the soul expunger blocked, but he informed it that he could now fully heal every 5 seconds. With his force, he threw it aside and dashed closer. The soul expunger swung its scythe continuously, and one of its attacks slashed his body, causing his blood to splatter everywhere. The system indicated his death was imminent in 0 seconds, but this was inverted, fully recovering his physical condition while he taunted the soul expunger to send any complaints to the ring. He then slashed the soul expunger's hand, forcing it to release Yuri. He announced that the next hit would be the last, as it was his most powerful strike. Drawing his sword backward to gather more force, he insulted the soul expunger, telling it to brace for his attack. He then unleashed his sword forward with his chain bloom skill, causing a massive explosion and a storm of magic petals. The soul expunger screamed in pain and slowly turned to dust. Yuri, released from its grasp, collapsed and was about to hit the ground when, fortunately, someone rushed to catch her. She slowly opened her eyes and was shocked to find him looking down at her. Smiling, he told her he was glad she was safe, and she stuttered a thankful response. Mana teased Yuri, suggesting she seemed to be in a good mood but asked if she wasn't forgetting about the curse. Then, pouring holy water over her hand, Yuri reassured that she should now be fine. Mana commented on how unbelievable it was that the monster had been waiting for the moment the holy water's effect wore off. Meanwhile, he turned towards the side, drawn by the continuous noise, and was shocked to see a swarm of system notifications. Realizing it was the ring's effect, he looked at the corpse's grudge ring, wondering how long its effects would continue. Staring at the ring, he then saw its red crystal crack and release a strong block of smoke, leaving him shocked and confused. In a panic, he waved his hand up and down, wondering if the ring was going to explode. He also tried to take it off, only to realize it wouldn't budge. Suddenly, it emitted a bright light, and he braced himself for an explosion, closing his eyes. However, when only a sound followed, he opened his eyes in confusion and saw the system notifying him that the corpse's grudge ring's activation number had reached its maximum, transforming it into a corroded ring. The ladies noticed the light emanating from his ring and inquired about what happened. He sighed and mentioned there was something strange about the dropped item he had acquired. Yuri, concerned, asked if it was okay, to which he replied that it seemed to be harmless for now. He then opted to unequip the ring, pondering if it was as simple as that. As the ring disappeared from his finger, he asked them what they should do next. Mana suggested that since Yuri had been through a lot today, they should just collect the magic stones and head back. Yuri apologized, blaming herself for the ordeal, but Mana reassured her not to worry about it. However, Yuri, determined, proclaimed that she had decided to do her very best in gathering all the magic stones. A few minutes later, they cheered Yuri on as she killed skeleton monsters and gathered magic stones. However, after a few hours, Yoshito was down on the ground, exhausted, and Mana tried to stop Yuri from gathering more resources. Yet, Yuri was determined and told them that she could still go on. The conquest of Persephone continued smoothly afterward, and due to the large number of challengers, the highest conquered floor kept advancing. In just 1 week, a report arrived that the 30th floor boss room had been discovered. However, in the Tokyo branch of the Challenger Management Bureau, he put his coffee down on the table and stared at it for a moment when he overheard someone asking if they had heard about the boss room in Persephone. The man asked his friend if he was talking about how the boss room's door was sealed and that nobody was able to get inside. Suddenly, someone thanked him for waiting, and Mana asked if it was true that today they were going to check out Persephone's boss room, but he told them they still didn't know the method for opening the door. Mana proudly laughed and told him that an acquaintance of hers had found a hint on the top floor. Shocked, he shouted, asking her if she was serious, and Mana, sweating, told him to be quiet. She then whispered to him that the hint was a short phrase, as proof of many deaths, raise the proof of decay. He asked her what that meant, but she replied that she didn't understand it either. He questioned if there was no meaning to it, and she suggested that it seemed so. Yuri, stepping back in fear, told them she also got her hands on some information, and that many people in Persephone had received rings with a death effect on them. Mana asked if he had something similar, to which he opened his inventory to retrieve the ring while Yuri mentioned that it seemed a person could only receive one of them, and some people thought it might be some kind of key item. He realized that even after hunting more minor foes, another ring like it didn't drop. He then remembered the system notifications continuously popping up in the Persephone Tower, and the transformation of the corpse's grudge ring to the corroded ring, in light of the cryptic phrase. Yuri mentioned that it looked like even after equipping the rings, the boss room wouldn't open. But he just stood up and walked away, leaving the ladies looking at him confused. He told them they should head to Persephone and tossed his ring into the air, proudly proclaiming that somehow, it seemed only his ring could open the boss room like a magic key. A moment later, they arrived at the magic tower, Persephone 30th floor. He walked in front, wondering what he should do if his guess was wrong. He remembered Mana kicking him in anger and Yuri telling him how embarrassing he was, making him not want them to look at him with disdain. He snapped back to the present when Yuri asked why he thought his ring could open the door. He replied that after activating the death effect of his ring to the limit, it transformed into a different item when dropped. Yuri, shocked, shouted, asking him if he had activated the death effect intentionally. She then realized, remembering that he had infinite revival, but Mana thought he was being reckless again. He knew he had only used reversal, but he replied that there was no effect on the ring after the transformation and thought it strange that it changed for no apparent reason. That's when he remembered the hint to present the evidence of decay as proof of many deaths. In other words, by activating the death effects multiple times and presenting the decayed ring. He believed that would be the key to opening the door, which they proudly agreed upon. He turned around in shyness and told them he just happened to notice it, making Mana whisper to Yuri that she was glad he was with them. Yuri told Mana that Yoshito was embarrassed. He walked away shyly, realizing that he had said too much, and shakily told his ring that he was counting on it because whether he became a laughingstock or not all depended on it. They then arrived in front of the boss room, and Mana tried to push the door but, after exhausting herself, told them it was no luck at all and just like they said, the door wouldn't open. Mana then told him it was his turn now and she would leave the rest to him. He stutteringly replied, "Okay." He then walked to the door, telling himself it was alright and he should believe in his prediction. He sighed and raised his ring, ordering the door to open, stating it was its pass. But he only received silence and waited for a moment, yet the door didn't open. Hurt that he was wrong, Mana asked if it wouldn't open, and Yuri suggested that maybe it just took time. Suddenly, the ring on his finger lit up, and the door released a bright light and sound too. The door then slowly opened, making him very glad that it had opened, and he thanked God for it. He then realized that he was so focused on whether the door would open properly or not that he had forgotten there was a boss ahead. He broke out in a sweat when he remembered that it was the 30th floor, so the boss there should be stronger than the one they had defeated earlier in the Hermes Tower. He turned around to tell them that they should regroup there for a moment, not noticing a hand coming out from the room. Suddenly, the hand grabbed him and dragged him inside the room, making the ladies panic. The hand threw him inside, and he slammed onto the floor hard but managed to stop himself from being thrown further. He shook in fear when he felt something and shouted to the ladies, who were rushing to him, not to come closer. Suddenly, the door closed shut and was sealed with magic once again. He stood up, asking if just leaving right after opening the door was definitely not allowed. He then faced the portal that appeared behind him, and something slowly emerged from the portal. The boss walked closer to them, and they all readied themselves to fight, visibly worried. The boss then lifted its cane and slammed it into the ground hard. A bright light appeared above the boss, and then the boss glared at them with its shining red eyes. It then screamed, sending a loud and strong blast of air toward them. He covered his face while still looking at the boss, knowing that there was no choice, and told them that it seemed he had no choice but to take on the responsibility of having opened the door. The Elder Bone Priest floats in the air, beginning to chant. Suddenly, it unleashes its power, enveloping the surroundings. Behind the fires, skeletons emerge. They are follower skeletons. Realizing that the boss monster can summon a legion of minions, he knows they'll be at a disadvantage if he doesn't end it quickly. He dashes toward the boss at high speed, leaping over it, determined to ignore the minions and take them all out at once. As he closes in on the Elder Bone Priest, he attacks, but is taken aback when it conjures a shield to protect itself and meets his gaze. It then counterattacks, hurling him away. However, he manages to land safely, shouting, "Their defense is flawless." Suddenly, a skeleton materializes behind him, poised to slash, but he swiftly swings his sword backward just in time. Unfortunately, another skeleton appears behind him and stabs him. He turns back in anger and confusion upon seeing two more skeletons ready to slash. He falls, and as a penalty for his death, his defense decreases by 40%. However, thanks to his inversion ability, it actually increases. He revives behind one of the skeletons and attacks, but it blocks his strike. Using all his strength and gripping his sword tightly, noting that although they are mere bones, both the weight of their attacks and their reaction speed surpass those on the lower floors. Struggling not to be overwhelmed, he realizes that even handling one skeleton is challenging, yet there are so many, making him wonder how they are supposed to cope. Suddenly, two skeletons grasp him from behind and pin him to the floor. Shocked, he looks up as the Elder Bone Priest gazes down at him, prompting him to curse in anger. The Elder Bone Priest suddenly glanced to the side, puzzling him. He followed its gaze and saw Yuri and Mana surrounded by skeletons. Yuri aimed her staff and unleashed a powerful blast at the skeletons, resulting in a loud explosion. She cheered, thinking they had succeeded, but her joy turned to fear when she saw the skeletons unharmed and still standing in their positions. One of the skeletons swung its sword at Mana, who fortunately blocked it with her dagger. Then, a swarm of skeletons charged towards them, causing panic as they realized there was nowhere to escape. He struggled to free himself from the skeleton's grasp and shouted for them to move, fearing for Yuri and Mana's safety. His warning was cut short by a shadow looming closer. The Elder Bone Priest then raised its cane and forcefully brought it down on his arm, severing it. He clenched his teeth in agony and screamed. The skeletons briefly released him, only to pin him down again. He was about to question the Elder Bone Priest, but before he could speak, the priest sliced off one of his legs, prompting another scream of pain as the skeletons and the boss watched with delight. Barely able to speak, he pleaded with the Elder Bone Priest to stop, but the priest merely smiled at him. The skeletons then seized his face until all he could see was his own blood. They tore him apart, his screams of pain echoing. Minutes later, he lay in his own blood, severed limbs beside him. He caught a glimpse of the Elder Bone Priest lifting its cane for another attack. Laughing through tears, he remarked, "It looks like this staff is going to haunt me." He then died, and the Elder Bone Priest's laughter echoed, reveling in its victory. A few seconds later, he opened his eyes and was shocked to find the Elder Bone Priest staring down at him. He remembered the brutal way they had slashed his hand, making his hands tremble with fear, and cut his leg, prompting him to cover his mouth in horror. He also recalled the torture, causing his mind to snap, filling him with screams and cries of fear. His mind was in turmoil as he watched the enemy laughing, but he mustered the strength to stand up. Despite being traumatized, he knew he had to return and succeed. Otherwise, no one would save Yuri and Mana. He needed to hurry, revive, defeat the boss, and rescue them. Realizing he had to set aside his fear for now, he wondered why his body still trembled uncontrollably. A notification confirmed his death and announced that his skill of infinite revival would be activated. Deciding it was prudent to change his revival location, the system prompted him to prepare for revival. He then respawned behind the Elder Bone Priest and saw Yuri and Mana surrounded by skeletons and consumed by fear. As he tried to shout, the Elder Bone Priest turned to notice him. With his hand trembling, he reached out to Yuri and Mana but despairingly let his hand fall, feeling pathetic for his inability to move. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he watched Yuri and Mana crying on the floor in terror. As the Elder Bone Priest approached him, a loud explosion suddenly echoed through the chamber. Everyone turned towards the sealed gate as a mysterious figure forced it open with immense power. The man stepped through the destroyed gate, commenting with surprise that he hadn't expected to find anyone inside, given the door was reputed to be unopenable. Glancing at the scene, Yuri and Mana on the floor, surrounded by skeletons, and him crying helplessly, the man's expression turned to anger, noting that it clearly wasn't a good situation. Suddenly, skeletons materialized behind him, poised to strike once more. Fortuitously, the man appeared behind him in a flash of lightning. With a mighty swing of his huge sword, he shattered the skeletons, announcing that he'd lend a hand. He reassured him by revealing his identity as Dominator King Kagura Okiomi, ensuring that no one would die under his watch. Recollecting the title, he realized that Dominator King was awarded only to those who had conquered a grand magic tower beyond the 100th floor, a title reserved for a few heroic dominators in Japan. Okiomi then suggested they defer their discussion for later and focus on defeating the threatening presence. Plunging his flaming sword into the ground, he cast Floga Lenhos. The sword then unleashed a fierce flame that scorched the encircling skeletons. Impressed, he exclaimed at the spectacle. Meanwhile, the Elder Bone Priest, thrown into panic by the approaching flames, soared above to escape, only to find Okiomi behind it, declaring that the boss wouldn't get away. The priest quickly shielded itself, but as Okiomi's sword struck, it unleashed a force that shattered the ground beneath them. The shield cracked, and Okiomi's blow landed on the Elder Bone Priest, causing a loud explosion. He shielded his face as Okiomi silently observed him from above. Suddenly, the Bone Elder Priest reappeared behind Okiomi, ready to attack, but with a swift punch, Okiomi sent it reeling backward onto the floor. Turning to him, Okiomi addressed him as youngster, catching him off guard. He insisted that the finishing blow should be his, explaining that though he did not know what he had endured, his face bore the marks of it and it was his fight to finish. Gratefully bending down to grab his sword, he prepared as the Elder Bone Priest charged at him. With a decisive swing, he slew the priest, thanking Okiomi once more and expressing that his support had rekindled his fighting spirit. Okiomi smiled upon witnessing his victory and commented that it seemed he had overcome his fear, to which he replied affirmatively. Okiomi then encouraged him to express himself without reservations and congratulated him, dubbing him the Dominator of the Tower of Persephone. He looked at Okiomi, confused, and pointed out that he had only delivered the final blow. Okiomi was the true conqueror of that boss. However, Okiomi countered, stating that regardless of the process, the reward belongs to the one who defeats the boss. He offered all the rewards to Okiomi, insisting he take them, but Okiomi declined. As he sensed someone approaching, Okiomi suggested they use the rewards to grow stronger together. Okiomi then shared that he was not in need of money and already possessed a weapon that served as his partner, seeing no reason not to pass on the benefits to the younger generation. They all looked at Okiyomi, who expressed his curiosity about the unique weapon they had obtained, especially wanting to see what it was like, prompting a look from Mana that felt like deja vu. Agreeing to show the weapon, he was initially disappointed to reveal that it was a staff named Arcanum Aqua. Upon activating it, the staff materialized before them, stunning everyone with its beauty. Noticing that it was a magic staff, Okiyomi asked if he was proficient with magic. He admitted he was not and turned to Yuri, suggesting that if it pertained to magic, it should go to her. He then offered the staff to Yuri and asked if she would like to try using it. Yuri remained silent, which puzzled him. When he called her name, she sadly confessed that she didn't feel deserving of the staff. Surprised, he asked her why. Yuri revealed that after discussing with Mana, they realized they hadn't been of any help at all, not just this time but also during the previous boss fight, feeling like a burden to him. Mana then expressed doubt about their decision to form a party in the first place. He urged them to wait, explaining that he too hadn't been of much help this time, and without Okiyomi, he couldn't have protected them. Mana smiled at him, challenging his perception by asking if he hadn't realized that to him, they were merely objects to protect. His affirmation of their vulnerability only proved her point. He responded anxiously, admitting that there was indeed a significant gap between their abilities, which saddened him upon seeing their reaction. However, Mana turned this into a motivation for them, declaring it the reason they needed to become stronger, which surprised him. Yuri then declared that they would tackle the Tower of Persephone by themselves to grow stronger without his protection. Mana added that they would return once they were capable enough. As Yuri insisted that he keep the staff until then, he impulsively threw the staff back to her, insisting that it was all the more reason for her to have it if they were to become strong. Yuri caught the staff in confusion and held it tightly. Suddenly, the system announced that the Tower of Persephone's boss had been defeated and that the tower would vanish in 10 seconds, initiating a forced transfer. As they started being pulled away, he assured the girls that he would see them later. A minute later, as he lay on the ground, Okiyomi commented on his mature farewell, but he confessed that it didn't feel right to him, admitting he felt quite lonely. When Okiyomi called him by his name, he was puzzled, asking if he had ever mentioned his name. Okiyomi explained that the girls had used his name. Seeing his loneliness, Okiyomi suggested that if he wanted to pass the time, he could hang out with him for a bit. He glanced at Okiyomi, who asked if he needed something. He started to say that he had been summoned by the chief, but Okiyomi, mid-yawn, finished his sentence, pointing out it was the chief of the Tokyo Metropolitan Management Bureau. While he pondered over Fayun, Okiyomi mentioned that he usually operated in the central region, so being called all the way there likely meant a troublesome assignment. Okiyomi then explained that he had stopped by Persephone to kill some time before the meeting, and that's when he encountered him, questioning why Okiyomi would bother with someone like him, especially since his infinite revival hadn't triggered in front of Okiyomi. He wondered aloud about Okiyomi's interest. Okiyomi responded that he had heard from Fayun that he was considered a promising dominator of the next generation, leaving him stunned. He shouted, asking if the chief really said that, to which Okiyomi nodded affirmatively. Okiyomi then shared his initial impression upon hearing his name in the boss's room. He thought he was just an average guy. Okiyomi reassured him not to worry, just to put in more effort next time. Checking his phone, Okiyomi noted that despite their time killing, they still had time before the appointment. He then suggested they go shopping to unwind, proudly declaring that he would buy him anything and teach him a smart way to manage money, which amazed him as learning from one of the few Dominator kings in Japan was an incredible opportunity. Moments later, they arrived at the Tokyo Metropolitan Management Bureau building. He wore sunglasses and a large necklace over an open polo, while Okiyomi sported attire resembling that of a millionaire gangster. Fayun stared at them in silence before inquiring about their identities. He exclaimed, telling Fayun not to ask if she already knew, and she responded that it was because of his unusual outfit. Okiyomi chimed in, humorously noting that even though being a Dominator king was lucrative, it meant little without a sense of fashion. Fayun, while responding to Okiyomi's comment about fashion, noted that even so, she thought his style was excessively disheveled. In response, he slammed his fist on the table angrily, challenging Fayun about her own fashion sense, accusing her of likely wearing sloppy clothes at home. Unruffled, she pulled a tablet from beside her, placed it on the table, flipped it to show her picture, and pointed to the description below which stated that her outfit was ranked in the top 7 latest trendy fashions chosen by the popular management chief. Overwhelmed by embarrassment, he kneeled and apologized profusely, prompting Okiyomi to burst into hearty laughter. Changing the subject, Okiyomi asked Fayun why he had been summoned. She explained that there was only one reason to call someone of his stature. The Tokyo Metropolitan Challengers Management Bureau was planning a large-scale operation. He echoed her, seeking confirmation about the operation, to which she affirmed and detailed that it involved conquering the Great Magic Tower Zeus, the largest magic-infested location in Kanto. Okiomi noted that it was as he suspected, given the rising death toll as the floors of conquest increased. Fayun continued, stating that the management could no longer overlook the situation, and that resources from the upper floors of Zeus would be distributed to all volunteers involved in the operation. She explained that volunteers would be placed from the frontline conquest team to the rear support units according to their abilities. She emphasized the unparalleled danger of the Great Magic Tower and expected numerous casualties even with the Management Bureau's leadership, but hoped his presence on the front lines would slightly reduce that number. She then hailed Okiomi as the great dominator who once conquered the Great Magic Tower Hephaestus in the central region. Okiomi replied that if his cooperation could save lives, he would lend as much power as necessary. Watching the exchange, he felt utterly out of place. Okiomi then stipulated to Fayun that he had one condition: he was bringing him to the front lines as well. Fayun agreed, leaving him in stunned shock and horror. Okiomi turned to him, declaring that he was counting on him and calling him his partner. At first, he remained silent and horrified, but then he erupted, shouting, "What?" Well guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, comment part 4 in the comments section. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.